So I have a confession to make, and I need to just get it off my chest. Last week, I was supposed to wear this shirt. Like in my brain, I'd set it out. These are new Foundation Kids shirts, and last week would have been the perfect week to wear it, and I forgot to wear it. And so I was like, well, how do I do that? Robin even asked me. She said, hey, I thought you said you were going to wear your Foundation Kids shirt. And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So I was like, don't worry, I'm going to make it up to you. I'm going to wear it on the hottest day of the year so far. And it's the dumbest decision I've made so far. Like, right now, I'm already sweating. And the school still thinks it's winter. And so, like, the air conditioning is just perfect. So we're just, if y'all want to, this water is actually warm, too. So I got nothing for you other than we're going to move quickly, and I'm going to roll my sleeves up because we got some work to do. Hey, we're in week 3 of a series, Strong and Beautiful. And I want to catch you up. Last week was the beginning of spring break. This week is the end of spring break, and so there's people missing here and there. And so this will be a good summary when they watch it online here this week at some point. So here's our summary. Week 1, we said we want to start with a fundamental truth of Christianity, that every single person who's a follower of Jesus is a child of God. We took a look in the Bible and we established that. We established it on a number of different levels, but we said that establishing that we are children of God is simply putting the ball on the tee. It's simply preheating the oven. It's simply making the dinner reservation. It is not eating out. It's not actually cooking anything. It's not actually getting engaged or involved in the game. It's simply the beginning. That's all that understanding gets us. We kind of took a look at how this whole thing began, and we said this: the beginning of sin was really a simple transaction. We traded the law of God and fell under the law of sin. That in the beginning, when man and woman started just kind of hanging out and chilling out, they made a decision. They kind of looked around and said, man, this is perfect. I think we can do better. And so they came out from under this place where God had provided in the garden, where God had established them and given them strength and power. They were satisfied. God was satisfied. And I said, you know what? No longer are we satisfied. We're going to trade this in, and we're going to come over here. They didn't know what it was, but we're going to trade it into this other thing, which by default was the law of sin. And in this place, they realized they can't satisfy themselves, they can't satisfy the law, and they can't satisfy God. But Jesus came to earth, came to our place, lived among us as a man, and he died on the cross, which satisfies the law of sin, and the Holy Spirit, a gift from God, comes into the lives of believers, and we are adopted back into the family of God. And so the law of sin is satisfied, and the law of God is now satisfied through our adoption. And that is simply setting the ball on the tee. And so if you're not a believer this morning, not a follower of Jesus, that's the first place you begin. It's not about what you do with your life afterwards. It's just about, hey, can we come to a place where we feel like we're trapped and nothing satisfies us and we can't satisfy God? Can we come to a place to set the ball on the tee, to turn the thing to 450, to put the things in motion, to make the reservation? That's all following Jesus at the beginning is. But we said we can't stop there. Once we make that decision to embrace who we are supposed to be as children of God, we have two very distinctly different approaches to life, men and women. And so last week, we looked at the idea that the word beautiful carries so much weight in our culture. And specifically with women, not that it's exclusively an issue, but specifically with women, it's predominantly an issue where Satan has caused this to happen. We looked at a study that the company Dove has done, which they came back, a global study, which said 6 out of 10 women hold back from participating fully in life, even down to offering their own opinion in a public setting because they do not feel like they're beautiful. That wasn't a study we did. It was a study that Dove did, the beauty company. A global study that's where the feedback came back, that they would hold out of important opportunities and value things that they valued in life simply because they were afraid all eyes would turn towards them. And because of that, we found that the world is far worse off for it. That Satan has convinced half of our population, don't say what God is doing inside of you when it goes against the grain, because all the eyes will be on you. And he started to feed them lies. Ultimately, we established Satan has been successful in making something that is subjective becomes something that carries the weight of law. That ultimately we establish that beauty is very subjective. Then in some cultures, thin is in. And then you go to another culture and thin is simply a sign of poverty, right? That he's taken something that's so subjective, yet he's convinced us to allow it to carry the very weight of law. We concluded, if you can be convinced, ladies, that subjective beauty is tied to your absolute value, which then results in your hanging back from participating fully in life, Satan wins and our world is worse for it. And we ended with a question last week. Who told you that you weren't beautiful? And you should consider the source. Because from the very beginning, Satan has had it in his brain, if I can undo what God has done, I discredit everything that comes after it. Remember, in the creation story, God doesn't use the word beautiful. In fact, the word beautiful doesn't show up until after the fall, until after sin has entered into the world. When God sees something that's perfect, he uses the word good or of me. That's what he says about his creation. And then suddenly, that's not good enough anymore because they established that they're not of God. They left the law of God, went to the law of sin, and so they were like, maybe we're not as connected to God as we thought. So they created these other things, these other concepts, these other words. Beautiful was one of them. Suddenly we have this value in this word that hardly no one takes stock in and considers it for themselves. That was last week. So fellas, it's your turn this week. The enemy plays tricks with words. We see it with beautiful. We see how he's silenced half of our population 60% of the time to not share what God's doing in their life for fear of the eyes that look at them. Fellas, I think this one's a little more difficult to talk about. You see, there's a beauty industry that's 9 figures large yearly. Hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into this industry. It's something that's talked about regularly and out loud. However, for fellas, there's another word. There's another word that's kind of on the inside. There are some people that talk about it, but there's this innate desire to be strong. We ask the question, should a man be strong? Is strength good? Often the measure of a man can be found in his strength. We say things like this to your children: eat your vegetables so you can grow up to be big and strong like your daddy, right? Those are the things that we say. We find stories in the Bible that support this idea of who we're supposed to be as men, this strength. We look in 2 Samuel 23, verse 20. I'll read it to you. These got some big words, so I'm going to fumble them just because it's fun. Benaniah, didn't fumble that one, son of Jehoiada, I think that's how you do it, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, close enough, performed great exploits, right? We're trucking. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. Hashtag for the win. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And verse 21, and the hashtag wasn't in the Bible, by the way. That was me. Verse 21, and he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club. He snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. The Egyptian got pistol whipped, you know what I'm saying? And then he used it on him. So if we read the original language, there's a little poetry lost when we translate it into English. There's a kind of a play on words and really ending syllables or consonants that happens in the original language. And so you kind of get this feeling that as he's describing what he's done, when he talks about the Moab's 2 mightiest warriors, if you read it in the original text, it actually kind of comes across more like 2 of Moab's lion-like men. And so it's kind of tongue-in-cheek where he says he killed these 2 lion-like men, and if that didn't convince you, he also jumped in a pit on a snowy day and killed a real lion, right? Took the spear from a large Egyptian, a giant, and used it on him. Strength and might, a warrior type. This instinct, this persona is something we value in our culture. And as men, we secretly want to be that kind of guy. You know, we kind of, that's why we play Call of Duty. I don't play Call of Duty anymore because I have kids, but that's why I used to play Call of Duty. If I can't be one, why not try to pretend one on a video game? Some of us have served in the military, and maybe you've even lived out some of this. But in real, everyday, day-to-day life here in Newnan, Georgia, it's more on the inside. It's more secret than anything. You see, as a culture, we gravitate towards strength. And I believe strength is one of the greatest needs in our world today. I don't think that it's a mistake that men are drawn to it, that men desire it. And honestly, I don't think that strength is a word that only is attached to men. I believe it works for both genders. However, I do want to spend some time speaking directly to men this week because we seem to be a little more consumed with a desire for it. The Bible reinforces our desire for strength. In the Old Testament, which is the piece of the Bible that comes before Jesus shows up, the Bible is kind of broken into two sections. The Old Testament chronicles everything before Jesus, and the New Testament talks about everything that happens after Jesus has arrived. And so in the Old Testament, there's a book by the name of Joshua. Joshua chapter 1 verse 9 says this, "Have I not commanded you," this is God talking, "have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." This is a promise that God makes to his commander, his leader of his nation of people. Be strong and courageous. But we're not a commander of an army. We're not a leader of a nation. We don't have thousands of men and women and children that were going up against enemy countries and invading their space, which is what they were doing. They weren't marching on cities. We're not marching on cities. They were. So we say, well, maybe this idea of strength, maybe that's just a Bible thing. Maybe more specifically, it's just an Old Testament thing. Oh, I think it actually occurs in the New Testament as well. And not in the same context of a warrior going to battle. Here's a bit of background. We've talked about Paul a lot. Paul was the first church planter, and arguably the greatest church planter. And so Paul had spent some time in this one particular city called Corinth. Corinth was a port town. It was kind of a midpoint between east and west, and the ships would come in and they would make stops there in this port city. And there was a lot of trading. It was like a melting pot from places all over the world, from the east and from the west, that would come into this place as a pit stop, right? And so he decided to go there. This is like Vegas on steroids, this place called Corinth. Everything you can imagine, and then more, is happening here in Corinth. And so he decides to go and plant a church there. He spends about 18 months with this group of people. He feels confident that, hey, you know what, I think you're strong, I think you're ready to survive, and so he moves on to the next city. We find that in the book of Acts, that period of planting and that time that's invested. However, we find in the book of 1 Corinthians, he decides he needs to write some letters to take care of a few issues that are occurring, which is when you look in your Bible, you see 1 and 2 Corinthians. Those are two checkup letters that Paul writes back to this church that he had planted. They're having some issues. He spends the entirety of his letter correcting those issues and ultimately pointing every single one of those issues back to Jesus. He's saying, hey, these struggles that you're having, there is a truth and there's a way, and both of them go back to Jesus. Don't forget that. I'll read you this one particular verse that we're talking about this morning. 1 Corinthians 16:13. He says this to them as he concludes. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. Now, I don't think he was talking in that same idea as God to Joshua as he leads a nation to invade other cities and conquer a promised land. I think this strength is a little bit different. I think we can identify with this strength just a bit more. Again, I'll read it to you. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. The first piece, be on guard. Those are actually words that would be used for people that are part of a night watch. It's more than just don't fall asleep. It's make every effort to stay awake. It's a very active word, right? It's not just a, hey, make sure your eyes stay open. It's a, make sure that you're engaged and you're aware. And as a result of that, you will be on guard. You will stay awake because of the actions you take. And so when Paul is trying to tell these people, hey, you've got all these issues you've been dealing with. I'm going to point all of those issues back to Jesus, back to his truth, back to his way. And then I want to conclude with this idea, understanding that everything points back to Jesus, that he can solve those issues. I want to conclude with this. Make every effort to be active among yourselves, to not just keep your eyes open, but to keep yourself awake. Have you ever driven somewhere and you show up and you have no idea how you got there? Your eyes were open, but you weren't awake. That's the difference Paul is attempting to get across. He says, stand firm in the faith. Notice he doesn't say what kind of faith. We have to remember that as we read these letters from these apostles, these church fathers, these people that planted churches in the beginning, that they had spent so much time on the front end that they didn't spell out every piece of doctrine, every piece of thought and theology as they kind of had these conversations. So when he says faith, he's not just saying, hey, just this optimistic outlook on the world. When he says the word faith, he means faith in Jesus. Stand firm in the faith in Christ. In other words, they would have known that he wasn't saying, hey, stand firm in your faith in other people. Or stand firm in the faith of the promises that the world has made for you. You see, one of the issues that they were experiencing at this moment in this church was they had all these other teachers. And people were starting to cause division, saying, well, I like him better, and I like him better, and I kind of like the way he says this better, and I kind of like the way he says this better. And they were starting to butt heads with each other and cause issues. And he was like, hey, don't have faith in those people. Those are all great people. But have faith in Jesus is what he's calling them to be. He says, be courageous. The literal translation of this little piece of the verse, when it says be courageous, it literally just says act like men. Now that isn't a call to masculinity. It's actually not even commentary on gender. It's more a commentary and a call to maturity. He's saying don't act like children, act like grown adults. You're grown in your faith. You've had time to mature in your faith. Stand on Jesus. Stop standing on these other promises. Stand on Jesus. Stop following these other people. And act like an adult. You've known long enough. This shouldn't be happening. And then the summary. Be strong. Be strong. It's an active word again. It doesn't mean just to stand there and be it. It actually is translated more literally, be made strong. In other words, there's some action still needing to happen. Be made strong. You see, he realized the strength that a follower of Jesus needs is not something that comes from within. It's not something they were born with. It's something they receive from God. It's something that's given to them. Because at the end of the day, what followers of Jesus, what I have found in my own life, is that I can have strong opinions, and I can have strong persuasive speeches, and I can prepare well. But without Jesus, I am absolutely nothing. At best, I entertain for a few moments, but then the value ceases when I walk off the stage. With Jesus, we are nothing. The strength we have, it simply begins to fade away. Men, I want to ask you, what is it that you excel at in life? When you put together a top 3 things of this is who I am, would you allow me to say that that you're number one and number two, if it doesn't have Jesus, that you haven't even sniffed what you're capable of. Much less seen it. The definition of strong: able to withstand great force or pressure. Pressure. I'm under pressure. Obviously, there are different types of strength, right? I wonder if we should have a priority list for strength. You know, because strength is adjective. Like our strong can be is an adjective, right? Like we can have, like, hey, he's got a strong swing, right? Or, man, he's got a strong odor, which is me in this shirt right now. You know what I'm saying? For real. We're going to be fist bumping today like this. All kind of things. Oh, he's got a strong work ethic, right? He's got a strong passion or a strong desire. He's got strong managerial skills. I wonder if we should have a priority list. Like if we could choose a top 3 things that we should be strong at, what would they be? And would they be universal? I don't know. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not should we have one. Maybe we should ask the question, does God have one for us? Does that change things? Because I think for a moment we kind of are kind of walking down this path where it's like, well, I don't know, let me decide. Let me decide what my top 3 things I would like to be strong at. But when we change the reference to, well, I don't know, does God have a top 3 things for me? Since he is perfect, since he does kind of know all those things, what if he did have a top 3 list? What would it be? I think maybe here's the detrimental piece. Would God's top 3 list be as sexy as my top 3 list? Right? I mean, right now, I'm thinking about getting in beach shape. I've got about 60 days. You know what I'm saying? I know it's too late. Doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it. Thank you, sir. Praise the Lord. My feelings are really hurt right now. Oh! Leave it to your good friends. All right. I think we can come to a conclusion. I think we can come to a conclusion where we find that God maybe does have a preference for our priorities. I robbed you a little bit this morning. When I read that verse earlier, I think I've done this to you a couple times in the last few weeks, I didn't finish the thought. So fellas, this should help frame it just a little bit more as we think about strength. Let's go back to 1 Corinthians 16:13 and add 14 onto it. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. So when we see that word everything, obviously that gives us a pretty good sense of what's happening. So let's read it again. Be on your guard in love. Stand firm in the faith in love. Be courageous in love. Be strong in love. Maybe that helps us frame it. Or maybe we come to a place where it's like, you know what? I'd rather do the pit with the lion on a snowy day than think about what does love have to do with my life. As men, maybe we've decided that's just not us. If someone's going to describe me with adjectives, I do not want to say, he's so loving. I would rather than fill in a multitude of blanks. But loving just is not something I aspire to be. We defined love earlier in the series. We said this: love is no guarantees. It's vulnerability. It's taking a chance. It's sacrifice. Fellas, does that describe our pursuit of strength? When we think of how we ought to be viewed as strong men, does that even kind of seep in just a little bit? Romans 15:1 says this, "We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves." Don't we like survival of the fittest, though? Can't we just get rid of the weak people around us? Isn't that how we think sometimes as men? We're just like, man, we're just knocking them down and leaving them behind. And all of a sudden, this Bible comes into our life and says, maybe I should reshape how you view and think your world. And all of a sudden, you're saying, my strength is such an asset for me to finish. And the Bible says, maybe your strength is to help them finish with you. Is that the strength we're talking about? Is that what we are pursuing as men? This particular issue has started so many issues and conflicts within a church, where those who are more spiritually mature, where those who are stronger in the faith, look at those who are weaker and say, come back when you're ready. If you're a part of Foundation and you've been here and you've been in our gatherings, or you've been to Discover Foundation, you know that at Discover Foundation, if you're a follower of Jesus already and you're coming to our church, I almost try to talk you out of being a part of what we're doing. Because I want to make sure that every single person who follows Jesus knows that we're here to seek and save lost. People who haven't made a decision to find Jesus. And some of you could probably finish the sentence that those who have known Jesus the longest should give more than anyone else, sacrifice more than anyone else, because your preferences will matter least among everyone else. That if you've been connected with Jesus, you've got to set the standard for this is what it looks like to be a generous person in life. I'm not talking about the offering bucket. I'm talking about a lifestyle of generosity. Because at the end of the day, the non-believers, they don't see what you put in a bucket or what you put on the phone. That's not what we're talking about. But they do see how you sacrifice. They do see how you let your preferences down in the car, in the parking lot, or you left them at home. And we make sacrifices for the people who have never given Jesus a chance. You see, Paul always puts the responsibility on the stronger. He never puts the responsibility on those who are weaker. And to me, logically, that just makes sense, doesn't it? Doesn't that make more sense in our world? That the people who are stronger would take responsibility for growing up those who are weak? But it's so different from what we experience as men in our lives. To rise to the top, stand out, shine bright, cause everyone else just to eat our dust. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Great strength brings great responsibility. Great strength brings great responsibility. But maybe you're saying, you know what, that's in the Bible, and I'm not ready to follow the Bible, so I'm out on this. I have no desire to be strong, to help the weak, to bring them along. None of that. I still want to do my thing because that's what our world wants. Maybe the church world wants us to be a different kind of guy, different kind of person that interacts with the world. But in the real world, we value things differently. Maybe that's where you're at. Well, it just so happens that I did a little research this week, and the Pew Research Center, just in 2017, they did a national study that asked this question. What is it that you expect out of men? Give us one-word answers. What is it that you expect out of men? You know the number one answer? 90+% of people listed this word as their number one answer. When they said, this is what we expect. It has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with Jesus, just a national survey. What do you expect out of men? Number one word, honesty. Honesty. Strength was on the list. It was. Nowhere near honesty. Maybe the content of our character is making a comeback. Or maybe our world, just by being the very nature of created by God, has come to the realization that it sucks to be lied to. And it's no way to live, to walk through life where you can't trust the people that you work with and live with and interact with. That trust is a valued thing. Maybe we are all designed in the image of God, and we desire those good things in the people around us. And maybe even the people who don't know Jesus still have that desire for goodness. The question becomes, how do you grow your strength of character? How do you do it? I will submit to you this. You grow stronger by challenging yourself, surrounded by the strength of others. You grow stronger by challenging yourself, surrounded by the strength of others. In other words, if you want to become stronger, spend time with people stronger than you. Allow them to challenge you. Allow them to push you, to stretch you, to convince you to do things you didn't think you could do, to convince you to try things where you fall on your face because they know you're likely going to fail, but I'll be there to help pick you up. And to instill a confidence for you to try again. What if we became a group of men here at Foundation that said, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, it's not about me finishing first, it's about me finishing with others. What if we just kind of took this motto on that says, hey, we don't let the men around us quit. We don't let the men around us grow weak and weary. That we stand beside them and say, hey, in this moment, God has equipped me to be strong, not to kick you in the face and say, ha, but to pick you up and say, I'll walk with you. What if we were that kind of men? Ladies, what if we were that kind of men? Ladies, would you be proud of those men? Would your lives be more fulfilled knowing that the men in your life are honest? And they value opportunities to help the weak? That their strength was not found in who they could leave behind, but who they could bring with them.